So let's put it this way. Let's say that this is like a skill table, right? From no skill to, I guess, as much skill as you can have. And let's say that this is EU. So back in the day when I was competing, you had... Is this gonna fit? Right. We were right here. We were the top. There was nobody across all servers that was there. So if we draw, for example, NA. If we draw CIS. And if we draw C, right? Nobody was here. This spot was occupied. Like nobody was better than we were at a time, right? So we were pretty much unbeatable, unstoppable. We had the best clan across the entire world. Like, I don't know. Against the pretty much entire server. But then, and everybody was saying EU is the best server, EU server, best server, you know, everybody else is potatoes. But then you had a problem. If this is like 100, if this is like 10 out of 10, if this is top, we were there. But then you had a problem. Then you had this area here. Like this area here, which is like, I don't know, to like 75 maybe. Where we didn't have a follow-up. Like very, very early, we didn't really have a follow-up. The second and third were always kind of taken by the NA teams. Right? When we would go face other servers, this is like, I don't know, how do we do this? Like second and third, maybe, right? So when we would basically go face these other teams, and you would have 3 top teams from EU versus 3 top teams from NA or Russia. At a time, we were not facing any teams from Southeast Asia. You would have top team beating everybody else from NA and CIS, but then second and third team from EU pretty much losing against the NA and CIS, and we would either barely win or we would lose, right? So to say that the entire server was better was simply not true, in my opinion. We had the better top team, but the other ones were not that, there was a bigger discrepancy between the top team and the second, third, and fourth, for example, or fifth, than it was on the NA. Like, for example, if you had a top team on EU here, then you had the second here and the third here, right? This is EU. But on NA, you would have it 1, 2, 3, right? So this is how the EU would look like over how NA would look like. That was the problem, in my opinion, back in the day. So overall, you could say the NA wasn't a bad server. But here's when it kind of becomes interesting. I should have actually painted this in purple. Like, we should have painted this in purple. That would have been a better idea. It's kind of like super unicorn.
Flambass. I know the crayons have beautiful colors, and you look hungry. But please don't taste them. Leave them to me.
Don't worry, dude. Don't worry. Okay. Alright. So, this is like the top scene. Then, here comes the interesting part. When you look at between the rest of the server from the EU and NA, this is unfortunately where I can't talk about Russia because I haven't played on the Russian server that much. So this section is going to be kind of out. This section over here, which would be, I don't know, how big would we have to throw it, like, I don't know, from like to 40, something like that. Like this section here, in my opinion, was better than the NA and the Russian server. I feel like when it comes to this part of the player base, that's not top notch, but is not really bad. When you look at all three servers, I feel like EU overall was better. I can't say for CIS for sure, and I definitely can't say for Southeast Asian because I haven't played there, but everybody else who did always said the Southeast Asian server was by far the worst. Russia provided some good top competitive clans, but from what I've played on the Russian server, unless you're competing top of the top, I wasn't impressed. Same was with the NA. They had a decent top competitive scene, but not good enough for the rest of us. Not good enough to defeat the best, but overall they weren't bad. So you had like, how do I even draw that? Like you had a bit of a, I'm just gonna presume that it was the same thing on the Russian server. This is what it felt like for the American server. For example, like this is where the majority of their player base was. Like when you would go from EU to NA, it felt like the overall skill went down a bit. So when people would say, yeah, you know, EU is the best server, I'm not really sure that that was true. But then you come to the point where, what's up with these guys? What happens with the and I really, like I say, I can't really say that much about the Russian server. But what happens when it comes to potatoes? The shit that I saw on NA was insane. Like the NA potatoes were special kind of potatoes. Now this is not me trying to stat shame or anything like that, the actual server. This is just my personal experience over all of these years where I played on yeah, let's call it like the bottom 25% or something. When I would play on the servers. When I would come to NA and play in the lower leagues or with people that are not that good, I would always get my brain to explode. Like the shit that I would see there would always make me laugh. And I would always be like, what is going on?
I don't know what you are sketching, Flambas, but I realize that you missed a career choice. As a designer of vibrating thingies. Just one question. Where do the batteries go?
So, the EU potatoes are potatoes. Don't get me wrong. There's some really bad players here, right? There's bad stuff happening here. And there's a decent amount of them. But when I would go to NA, the potato plays that I would see on NA were definitely crazier than what I would see on EU. The Russians I don't know, maybe a bit better, maybe a bit better than the NA. But here's the thing that happens with NA server. The potatoes are true potatoes. Like they were true potatoes, but the regular player base was a bit less, and the regular players was a bit less skillful, but their competitive scene was how do we do it?
Celluaq's cheered. X500. So although it's a drawn grid, it appears NA is rather equally distributed between potatoes, casuals, actives and the non-existent top 25. LOL.
Sorry, what? Although it's a drawn grid, it appears NA is rather equally distributed between potatoes, casuals, actives, and yes. Now, this was a long time ago. This is not the end.
Good to see you having fun in WoWs again. Bit of a rough ride lately, but ranked and brawls seem to have cheered you up.
Yeah, anything that's got to do with competitive, I'm kind of all in. But here's the thing. So overall, you would say we have on EU, we have the top team, right? And overall, the regular player base that's not in the top is better than on other servers, right? But we have a shit ton of potatoes as well. And we have like a large amount of, like they scale. But if you take a look at the NA, the potatoes were potatoing, but the rest of the player base, while it may have been less skilled overall than EU, their top 50% was actually far more developed than EU. Like this was a mass of people that was slowly growing. And EU was kind of course, this is just my experience and my opinion. You do not have to agree. While the EU, you pretty much had one clan that was just on top, and then that clan kind of dissolved into couple of clans eventually. NA's pro scene was growing like a big mass until eventually this changed. And now when EU teams go against NA teams seem to be kicking their butts. And like, I don't remember every single King of the Sea, and I don't remember every single, there's just way too many of these things. And I don't want to nor expect to actually remember all of them. But now the NA competitive scene, these guys here have grown, and they are starting to push into this bracket. I mean, they already pushed into that bracket. And now, considering this clan is no more, the rest of the competitive scene now seems to be capped here, while the NA competitive scene has evolved. And this is something I have noticed long time ago, that the NA competitive scene seems to be evolving, while the EU competitive scene seemed, at least to me, that it was kind of losing its top notch. Now, this can, of course, be credited to the fact that back in the day, there was a lot of space for meta and evolution of strategies, experimenting, and surprising the enemy. Eventually, clans and teams learn from each other, and people were watching us very, very closely and learning.
If the top of NA is more developed than EU, does it require a bigger power pack?
Stop talking about the goddamn vibrators, Charlie. I'm serious here. So, eventually, fuck, now I lost my train of thoughts. Shit. Right, so, fuck. I can't get serious with anything with you people. Even though this is not supposed to be super serious and this is just my opinion, but still. Yeah, yes, people were watching Omni very, very carefully back in the day, and they were really trying to learn and adapt and counter. And I remember the longer we were competing, it was getting more and more difficult to actually stay on top. What is this based on, though? My experience, Mary, I've said it like 27 times by now. This is my experience and my thoughts, my opinions. They don't have to be true and you don't have to agree with them, and that's absolutely fine. This is just me talking about from my experience of from all the way when I competed till now when I just cost. And I'm sure a lot of teams and a lot of players are going to be looking at this and thinking this is so wrong. Fine, that's your opinion. So when you kind of lose the top, and that kind of shatters in a couple of clans, which are now pretty fucking good, but there was a time where they did not really belong in this number one position, where the NA kind of moved there, at least that was my opinion. Suddenly you had a problem where just losing one clan seemed to change the perspective of the entire server. So NA has evolved a lot, in my opinion, and props to them for that. As much as we had the banter between us at the beginning, and we were like, fuck NA, bunch of potatoes, we're better. Yeah, overall they were a bit lower, but their top teams were not as good as EU's top team, but they were working and evolving together. When the EU kind of lost the number one top team that kind of disintegrated into a bunch of other clans, which are now pretty good, NA just seemed to be working really, really good and got to the point where they deserved to be called top teams. And then now you're having a clash between these two servers where NA seems to be having a lot more material that's pretty good. Russian server was in the meantime also working, and unfortunately I can't really say how this group here. I don't know how playing the regular game on Russian server feels, because I haven't played it a lot. I only played like ranked and stuff when I would already rank on these servers. So when I would reach here, I was pretty much playing with potatoes, and they were bad. Like, they were bad. Or I would play with the really good dudes and they were decent. Like, they were pretty good, like these guys. But this is the knowledge that I don't exactly have. And now what's funny is that recently we have a couple of clans, fuck, what is the color, from top Southeast Asia competitive scene that kind of migrated to EU server, right? Clans like Vor. And they are always in the top 3-4 clans. So they evolved as well. They also have a decent competitive scene, but I have literally very little experience to none. How is it to play on this server? I played far too little there to actually know. So this whole, and why I'm basically talking about this, is when people tell me, these NA noobs and stuff like that, which server is better? It's really hard. It's really hard to kind of know which server is better, at least now, and which server is kind of both in randoms and competitive doing really good. Now, yes, of course, there's one more server. There's the Chinese server, but I played maybe 10 games there. I have no experience, none, basically no experience at all on Chinese server, and they are way behind in what's it called? In the development I don't know, did they finally catch up? But they were always like 1 or 2 years behind all the other servers in terms of patches. So I can't really say anything. Maybe if they had some players and teams that migrated to one of these servers to compete, maybe they do and I just don't know about them, but you know. So I would say that the EU's like EU random player is still and always was relatively high, right? In terms of average skill. That doesn't mean that the EU random player is good. Average random player. No, a lot of people are actually pretty bad. But when you compare it to other servers, they're decent, right? But NA, from everything that I have seen, has shown insane progress. And I have actually spent a decent amount of time on NA to know this. Now, I know that Russia and Southeast Asia are starting in the past couple of seasons to provide us with some really good competitive clans. So their scene must be somewhat okay as well, at least okay. CIS is Russian server. But I can mostly provide information from what I know based on these two servers. And I've been telling all of this to kind of explain to you that it's not easy when people come to me and they say, which server is the best server? What does that mean? Are we talking top team? Are we talking top teams? Are we even talking competitive? Are we talking random? Are we talking potatoes? Because if we're talking potatoes, I would say the NA and Russia have the best. Okay, this is going to sound contradictive. The biggest potatoes when it comes to...
This episode of Flambas and Crayons might get you some new subs from me. I just came up with a nickname for you. Batteries not included. Or the Rabbit Designer.
Batteries not included is actually pretty good. So I would say like these two servers seem to have, from my experience, or seemed to have in the past, the biggest potatoes. Overall random player was a bit lower in skill than the EU, but the top competitive on NA evolved far better and aged far better over time than EU, in my opinion. Like these guys showed some insane progress in comparison to what they were at the beginning to what they are now. Whereas the EU scene was always in the top, but there was a stretch between the rest of the clans and the top clan. And now that the top clan has kind of devolved into multiple clans, now the top clan is kind of also taking more space, and now we do have a couple of teams that are up there. But it's very, very hard to explain which server is better or worse and which players are worse and better. If you're very much delusional if you think that every single server doesn't have their fair share of potatoes. Like, trust me, every server has them. Every. The only question is, how are these potatoes potatoing, right? And this is by no means me trying to bash a certain server. I think I bashed pretty much all of these servers and I gave them some praise. Because we have some really top competitive players from Southeast Asia. We have shown a couple of teams from CIS as well, like Smile. Here we have Vor that migrated. NA teams like 07, incredibly consistent and dangerous. And EU teams have always been in the top, but they're fluctuating. Like the drops and back in the day you had very much a consistent top team, Omni, across all servers. And then the fights for second, third, fourth, fifth was kind of which server is going to take it and stuff like that. Who's going to be second this time? Who's going to be third this time? Now, there's far less consistency, I would say. Or at least there was a period of time on EU server where there was far less consistency in the top teams. They were going down and they were going up. You would see the team that used to be first now being like 16th. Yes, it's a mess. where NA seemed to be like consistently, slowly growing into this really, really strong top teams. And what I want to finish with is what I've noticed over the past couple of seasons is we no longer have that one team or one server or one clan like it used to be back in the day that is going to be dominating the competitive scene. We don't. Any one of these any one of these servers can now provide us with more than one team that has a very decent chance of taking the top of the top of everybody. We didn't have that back in the day. Back in the day, you knew pretty much who was going to be on top. And then it kind of started changing. And that, as a caster, that makes me actually pretty happy. Because when you're casting, you don't know who's going to win. And when there's server clashes and stuff like that, you have even less idea who's going to win. You can be biased. You don't have to be. But you don't know who's going to win. You can cheer for your team, for your clan, for your server at least, but you don't know if they're going to win. So stop saying that potatoes are only on one of the servers and this server is shit because we've seen some very questionable plays in potatoes. There's potatoes on every server, and these are all individual players. And there's really good clans and really good competitive teams and players across all servers. Trust me, it's crazier now than it ever was in terms of top and bottom. We have so many bad players that don't even know how to play the game, that are too high in the tiers because the progress is happening too fast. And we have so many players that are now equally skilled in the top competitive teams, which is awesome. That's sport. That's the best you can hope for. It's not entertaining for anybody if it's just one team that's always winning. Fuck that. That's kind of boring. What we have right now is a very healthy a competitive scene in terms of you never know who's going to win. Now, how's the competitive scene going to evolve or not? That is unfortunately up to less and less to community and more to wargaming, because they are the ones who pretty much get to call all the shots. They're in charge of clan battles. They now bought King of the Sea. Verizon was their tournament, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pretty much all the organization is now falling into their hands. And the most successful stuff that we have seen in this game did not originate from wargaming. It originated from the community. So, yeah, I don't know. We can just hope for the best. But I hoped, I hope that kind of cleared things a little bit for you. And that you can put that stupid thought out of your head that, this server sucks. No server sucks. It's just that there are good and bad players everywhere. Do I want to save this? Yeah, we'll deal with that later.